Hey everyone, welcome back to FF Squared. Today, with Jesse and I, we're going to be talking about roster construction for the Scott Fish Bowl. I actually have my live draft on Sunday, so I'm kind of excited for that.
Yes.
And today is the official Scott Fish Day. Are there any drafts today, or are they starting some tomorrow? I believe.
There's one. So I know the Buffalo draft, the live draft is happening today. I don't know how many other New York drafts are going, but I know in particular there's at least one, and they're going to start trickling out. I think the Atlanta draft is tomorrow, if I remember correctly, because Breezy's the one that posted that. And then it kind of just trickles out through the weekend for the live draft. So I would assume there's more than one, but I know there's at least one.
Yeah, going through 12 rounds and live draft on Sunday. That's going to be different than last year when I was doing it at home. I think we got to the 12th round after a week.
Yeah, it's interesting because it flies by. Because people are real hyped, excited. It's just so much fun. Like we did it last year. It was an absolute blast. I know you're gonna have fun. It's just the whole in-person atmosphere, and it's just everybody just geek, just have a good time, and somebody puts it on the board for you, the old school style, and they mark it down. So yeah, it's just live drafts are the best. So like if anybody ever can participate in a live draft, they should at least. If not, just go show up and like experience it. Because if you get the chance to do it, you'll know what it's like, and it's a lot of fun. I can't say enough about it.
Yeah, I think we need to convince Tom to do a live draft with the league winners every year somehow. We got to figure that out.
Yeah,
rent out an Airbnb.
Sure. Right, and just have it like they did on the league, the actual show like years ago. Yeah, that would be so much fun. Like destination drafts, that's where it's at. Like go to Vegas one year, we go to Florida, and like we just pick these like hot spots to go to. I'm on board. You don't got to convince me twice.
Awesome. So we're going to be piggybacking off of our last Scott Fish episode where we presented some data which is available on the league winners website. There's a special page dedicated to Scott Fish Bowl, including the charts and the data. But first of all, I owe everyone an apology. So as I was reviewing the data today, I caught an error on my Google Sheets. And the error was the RB2 average. Unfortunately, Google decided it knew better than what what it wanted to do. So it auto-populated the average. And I did not realize that I hadn't gone back and, for the RB2, I hadn't selected RB13 to RB24. Instead, the number was RB2 to RB13.
Changes it a bit.
It definitely changes it a little bit, right? So I was always, promoting the heavy RB build because of that, and I truly apologize. It's fixed on the site. I'll, tweet it out after this recording that hey, there's a fix in the error. So hopefully everyone can catch it before the drafts. But what it did was instead of RB2 being, their average being the third highest, it's now the fifth highest, behind QB1, RB1, QB2, and wide receiver 1. Which makes sense, which intuitively now sort of makes a lot more sense.
Right. Yeah. Because like it just makes sense. Like you get the high end scoring from daily assets. So those are all in those groups of tiers right there. The interesting part is the tight end one. Like that is a giant group of guys. And if you look at, which we'll show a little bit later, there's a massive difference between case in point, the tight end one and like an average tight end one. But we can get into all that with like the quarterbacks and everything like that. It's just fun to see kind of the average grouping on how it looks just right in front of your face like this.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I need to now rewire my brain in rethinking that, maybe wide receivers are a little bit, more valuable, especially if you're starting 3 wide receivers and only, especially in sleeper where you only have 2 flex spots and 1 kicker spot.
Yeah. So it makes it a little bit more interesting because like in sleeper, we don't get to just play all these kickers. We don't get that option. That's just, it's not formatted. Like they can't do it. So you have to start a kicker. So you definitely have to draft one. You can't go in where people are like, don't draft a kicker, just pick one up. Yeah, that's like not going to work in sleeper because you desperately need a guy and everyone's going to pick one because we're doing 22 rounds. So it's not like you could just wait until there's nobody left. It's just rookies and kickers that nobody wants. So yeah, it kind of changes the strategy a little bit.
Yeah, unlike MFL, where last year I just hoarded all the running backs. I can't start 5 running backs in this sleeper format, which is fine. I'm going to be picking Justin Tucker at like 11th round just to
Yeah,
pair him with Lamar.
it's interesting. Like the best kicker's been Bass and like Tyler Bass with the scoring format. So I know people are gonna want to take Tucker, but like you don't have to take Tucker. Like you
No.
could take Bass rounds later, and you're likely gonna get a better kicker for the scoring format. So FYI, just keep that in mind when you're paying attention to the settings, the scoring settings, because they're different in this format, and this happens to kickers. So make sure you understand the settings and how it affects each individual player. Because like the Seahawks quarterback is barely, he's like 20th, 22nd round, and he's a top 4 kicker in the scoring format. So FYI, pay attention to where the kickers are going.
It's a good point. There's a lot of changes in the scoring, and it changes a lot of individuals' scores.
Mm-hmm.
So I posted a roster build chart on Twitter way back when, and I kind of wanted to go through how I came up with the numbers a little bit. So this slide sort of attempts to explain the process. Basically, I took the first 4 rounds, and depending on what position you picked in the round, I kind of gave it a score. So like if you chose a QB in round 1, I give it 485. And if you kind of look at the averages, these averages are again based on historical stats from 2018 to 2022 and projections from 3 football analysts for the 2023. So like QB1, I kind of gave it a QB 6.5 finish because I don't know where that QB1 is landing. Is it Josh Allen and Mahomes, or is it Trevor Lawrence and Herbert at the tail end of the round?
I would say for people, if you know where you're drafting, lean one way or the other. Like these are the average projections down at the bottom of the corner. So if you're like the 101, you're going to want to shoot that average up a little bit higher. If you're the 111, 112, and you're taking the QB 8, like kind of push it down a little bit. So like use your draft position to your advantage. So it's not going to be exactly what we have projected here, but it kind of gives you a better idea of, can I actually get the QB1, or am I getting like a lower end, stuff like that, and just go each round. It'll help you out.
Right, exactly. So like these averages in that chart are no means, perfect. They're just a simple guideline. And you're right. Like that's why I kind of chose the 5th spot, because I knew I was going to get one of the 5 top QBs, because I'm including Lamar in that discussion. I know a lot of people have concerns with him lasting the full season, a new offensive coordinator, etc. But I'm looping Lamar into this because with his style of play, I think he is in the upper echelon. And if you look at a point per game, him and Fields were in the top 5. So that was, I hope someone like Josh Allen falls to me,
Nice.
or even Hurts. But in the case, someone takes Justin Jefferson first overall. But that's why, like, I know I'm landing up, a high quality quarterback that's going to give me that 500 plus season.
Right. And like for me, why I picked the 12th slot is it's that 3rd round reversal where I'm getting the 301. And based on what we've seen, like I could get someone such as Derrick Henry, or I've even in one of the mocks today, I got Cooper Kupp there. And I was like, these guys have the potential to be the RB1 and the wide receiver 1 in the scoring format. So I was totally fine doing that just because I know that 301 pick is going to be a very, very nice player. And I've seen running backs kind of fall down a little bit, which who knows if that actually is how it goes. But realistically, it's a chance at a high-end player. So that's why I went, instead of going in the middle, I went to the more extreme end. But that's just how I play fantasy. I kind of play extreme as it is. So it very much fits my personality.
Yeah, and I mean, I love the 10, 11, 12 spot usually in the 3 yards, mainly for that 301 thing. But I think the quarterback, 1 to 5 gives such a huge boost, or the tight end 1, that I feel like they're certain. I mean, like last year, who knew Geno Smith was going to be QB4 in Scott Fitzgerald?
Right? Exactly. He's the guy I'm targeting this year in the 4th round. Like in that 412 range. I've seen him fall there. If I get Geno at the 412, I'm going to be like happy dancing on Monday. So let's hope that happens because I'll be like, yes.
So speaking of roster builds, are you picking your QB2 early or late?
It depends who. So this is the biggest struggle with me being back end because it's going to shape my roster a lot. I have a hard time taking that basically the QB 10 at that 201 spot. Like that's just it's tough for me to talk myself into them being like the quarterback one, right? So I'm kind of fading quarterback. Like I find those builds a little bit more fun, even though it is treacherous because that QB2 usually will turn into someone like a Kenny Pickett or that range or a Stafford, one of those guys where it's like there is serious question marks around the situation. So it is very much a build that is not structurally as safe. It is higher risk, higher reward type strategy. But I'm honestly fine punting my quarterback too, as long as I can get one of those guys. Now, if I'm pushing it down to like a Jordan Love range, and I've just been like, well, this might not be the year, right? Or Sam Howell, one of those guys where you're just completely unsure. I want to at least get someone I know is a capable NFL quarterback. And I thought this was Matt Ryan last year, so maybe this was my fault to begin with, where I took him over Justin Fields in the scoring format because I was like, oh yeah, completions, he'll be safe. And it was an absolute train wreck. So sometimes it just goes to show what we don't know. But yeah, I will push it to a point. I'm going to make sure I at least get my QB2 by round 8 at the latest, probably. Like that's really pushing it. Depending on how it goes. If quarterbacks are flying off early and the QB20 is gone by round like 5, then I'm like, you know what? Pull the trigger on round 6. Like, let's just make sure we get him. So, as with anything, it's going to be draft dependent.
Yeah, I mean, I'm struggling with the same thing. Like in round 2, my philosophy is going to be, and I'm kind of giving it away. I know my draft's on Sunday, so all you Philly folks don't listen to this. No one's going to remember.
Right.
So in the second round, it's definitely, if TJ Hawk is there, I'm definitely picking him. My hope is Andrews falls, but I doubt that because I have a higher belief that TJ Hawk finishes as the tight end 2 or 3 versus someone like Dak Prescott or Tua finishing quarterback, top 8.
Yeah, Tua is really interesting to me because like he was dynamite last year, and I know he's dealing with injuries, but like if I get him at the 301, that's the pick that I'm going to struggle with pushing my QB2 or my QB1. Like if I get him there at 301 and then I go Geno, like the only problem with Tua is he's impossible to stack because you have to grab Tyreek Hill early and you have to grab Jalen Waddle early. So you have to really just hammer that Miami Dolphins offense extremely early. So that's the only issue I have with him, really.
Right. I mean, the QB2 I like targeting is Derek Carr in the 6th round. I feel like that's a sort of a Geno situation there, kind of going where he's got some good talent, a good offensive line, a good offensive coordinator, and he's going to be playing against the Buccaneers and the Falcons twice.
Right. It's just I just question the upside with Carr. Like he needs to throw like he specifically in this format needs touchdown passes, and he's only gone over 30 once in his career. So maybe he can get back to that year where he had over 30, where that was his MVP type year. I think it was 2016 where he had his best season. Mm-hmm. But he really needs to get back to that because, like, man, he's just so average. It's like, and last year he struggled. Like, he very much struggled. So hopefully, he shaped new place, new system. It all works out for him. And if you're getting him in the 6-7 round and he hits for you, that's a huge win.
Right. Maybe I should take your tale from last year and use it as a concern with a quarterback that's so sign of decline going to a new offense.
Yeah, the guy that's quote unquote safe. Yeah, safe. Right. Yeah, it's like safety. Not so much. that's Tannehill. So that's what scares me about Tannehill this year is people talk about, oh yeah, Tannehill, he's safe. It's like if the Titans suck, which they very much could, he could get benched, and you have a guy that's just a wasted roster spot. So, and I know he's going super late. He's going in the double-digit rounds, but the safety isn't there. Like that's why he's in that bucket with Howell and Ritter and all those guys.
Yeah, I'd rather take a shot at Ritter or Howell in that range. Yeah, especially as my QB3s.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think the first 4 rounds is very, very interesting. I'm more likely than not taking 2 QBs in the top 3. But it's again, you gotta make sure those two of those QBs, the both ones you pick, are in the top, 8 to really make a difference. If you
Yes.
somehow pick Russell Wilson like I did last year, it's gonna bomb your team right away.
Yeah. I was just looking at sleeper ADP, and he's the quarterback after. So I have the 412 because it comes back around after 301. After that pick, he's the next quarterback up, and it's like, yeah, I would feel so treacherous. Like him as my quarterback too just terrifies me. Like you can do it and you can talk yourself into it, but I don't know, man. There's a lot of risk. There's a lot of risk with that one.
Right. But again, like we pointed out, so here in round 4, your RB4, because of ADP, right? We're seeing like 20 plus cute quarterbacks going in the top 4 rounds because of the super flex setting. So you're kind of seeing, low end RB1s and high end RB2s kind of going in the 4th round. So you're kind of seeing this, your RB20 as your 48th player, essentially. So that's how these averages were made, based on ADP from goingfor2.com. And your point with tight end, right? You see this tight end one, and it's basically the average of the first 2 tight ends because you're landing Kelsey or Andrews at that point.
Right.
Which I actually think TJ Hawk might be a better play than Andrews in PPR. He actually finished second in tight end scoring in regular PPR scoring last year. So
I think it depends on how you view Addison coming in, and also if you are in on the Ravens offense this year. Because if you're in on them taking a step forward and Lamar being good, like I have a hard time envisioning Hawkinson being better than Andrews. Because even basically like at end of season stats, like Andrews was still really good as far as not efficiency, but basically his earning metrics. So I'm not as worried about Andrews in the format, but it could fall for you. Like I'm not 100%
yeah.
sure.
Sorry, my headphones fell, or
That's okay.
the battery died. Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of people forget that even with Addison, there's still so many vacated targets. That I feel like TJ Hawk's 86 targets last year, or was it reception? Don't quote me on that. One or the other. He had pretty. I think that's a pretty good, floor for him is reaching that 86-90 target / reception.
Yeah, he had 129 targets last year. Like he had a lot of targets. It was very surprising, like because he'd struggled. So he finally, and the Vikings, the way they used him, that's my whole issue is I expect him and Addison to kind of neutralize each other a little bit. So I'm questioning the upside, but the floor is high with Hawkinson. Like it's not going to be, he's not going to kill you. Like that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and I think he's got that trust with Cousins. So I think as Addison gains and his experience, Hawkinson, I think it might be a case where he's off to a fire start, and then kind of towards the end, you might see a little dip in production.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, to that point, right? I think that tight end one, that high 480 that Kelsey typically scores. I guess the only other player that had that kind of number was Mark Andrews back in 2021?
I think it was 2 years ago. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 2 years ago. Yeah, it was 2 years ago. 154 targets. My goodness, that's absurd.
So you'll see in the next slide that the tight end build is not a bad thing. So basically, I kind of took all of the possibilities, right? If you for the first 4 rounds, so it included QB. Just because I wanted to make sure that I was doing it cohesively and all the corners of the envelopes were covered.
Yeah.
But for this slide, I removed all the unrealistic builds. I mean, obviously, someone can try to build a roster with 3 quarterbacks in the first 4, but I removed any roster that had 3 quarterbacks or higher.
Makes sense.
So interestingly enough, the first one that came out was a QB tight end RB QB build. And that's assuming you're landing, a top 5 tight end, which, it's going to depend, right? I'm tooting the horn for TJ Hawkinson, but he could end up being a tight end 9, depending on touchdown regression or, like you say, Addison coming on during the season. A lot of times we forget, like, Evan Ingram last year finished as a top tight end, but he was only in the double digits rounds. So you're going to see some tight ends that are in new situations kind of sneak into that 4 to 7 tight end finish. So you got to be really clear and adamant that your tight end. If you're high on Hawkinson, then definitely pick him. But I think outside those top 3, I'm fading tight end a little bit.
Yeah, I don't. So my thought process is I don't want to completely just fade tight end. I want a guy who has a chance to be good. And for me, the cutoff is Freiermuth. If I miss out on Freiermuth and I'm just like going with Dolchitz or Chig or like McBride, any like late round guy or Higbee, as my tight end 1, I'm really just like, oof, that's not. I hate that, especially in this scoring format where like they're getting massive boosts. So I'm fine grabbing one of those middle tight ends out or tight ends if I don't get Andrews. The interesting spot is if Andrews comes to me and like if I'm on the turn and I got a shot at Andrews, I'm probably gonna take him. Like he's too good. But yeah, it could burn me. Like realistically, if the Ravens, if it fall apart, we saw it last year went. So if that happens again, then it's like, well, it was a good build this year. We'll see it next year. But yeah.
We both will be screwed because at the 105, I mean, most likely than not, I would say a really high percentage are going with Lamar Jackson because he's the one that's left over.
Yeah, it's realistically like I know everyone says Kelsey's the 101, but you usually see Kelsey in that 104-ish range. Like they'll take those top 3 quarterbacks, Kelsey, and those will be the top 4, and then it's the next quarterback. So it could be Lamar. Some people prefer Burrow, some people prefer Herbert or stuff like that. But yeah, it's realistically Lamar is the guy that ADP is going to settle on.
Yeah, and then a lot of the case for Burrow and Herbert is, Jackson has only played 12 games or 8 games in the last 2 years. So that injury concern is a huge. And then the other thing is the buys. A lot of teams have week 13 buys, and stacking the bar with those quarterbacks tends to be the play. And then you're just, in week 13 you're struggling.
Yeah, because you're talking about playoffs and stuff at that point, and people don't know like the playoffs are earlier in Scott Fishbowl than traditional leagues, right? Because there's so many people and there's so many leagues and teams, you have to cut it down a little bit shorter. So keep that in mind. If you're like between guys and you have their bye weeks, you can just choose not to take the guy that has the playoff bye week, right? Like you could take somebody else earlier whose bye week isn't as bad, so you don't run into that train wreck situation in the playoffs where you're like, oh man, like one of my top guys is I'm missing them this week. And this was like Jonathan Taylor last year, where everybody's like, I don't know if I could take JT because he's got a week 14 bye, right? So keep the bye weeks in mind. It's not a huge deal, but if you're torn between 2 guys and you view them equally, you don't have to take the guy with the bye week at the playoffs. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about drafting guys.
Yeah. I think it was fascinating that the second highest was, the tight end building. Obvious reasons, Kelsey and Andrews, but in these, I forget how many roster builds there are here, maybe 20, but there isn't a single one with wide receiver being the first in round 1. So essentially, we forgot to explain, but this is round 1 QB, round 2 tight end, round 3 our running back, and round 4 quarterback.
Yeah. So each round, the first one is one, like you're saying. Round 2 is the second guy. Round 3 is the third guy. So hey, just keep that in mind. It might not say it, but that is what we're drawing off of the data here. So
right. So I mean, if you're like picking a wide receiver in the first round, Justin Jefferson or like Jamar Chase and Cooper Kupp, it's kind of showing that it might not be the most optimal build because you have to land like the top 3 wide receiver. And Justin Jefferson, if healthy, I think he, in play for wide receiver 1. Cooper Kupp again, he was injured last year. So you're taking that risk on as well. Like, you'll reap the benefits, but if he gets injured again, your team's gonna sink. I mean, I guess that's with any player. We just talked about Lamar being the same way. Chase the same way. He was like wide receiver 6 in PP points per game, but he finished 11th overall because he did miss 4 games. So I feel like I'm taking the security of the high end tight end and the quarterbacks earlier than I'm taking an RB or a wide receiver.
I mean, yeah, it makes sense. It's interesting for me because I'm in the later, like, do I want to kind of reach for a certain player with like higher range of outcomes and really just dive into that? Because let's be real, this is a giant tournament. I know you have your individual leagues you're trying to win, but like everybody wants to make it in the playoffs to make a difference in your team. So don't be afraid to go a little bit bold in this scoring format, because think of all the teams that are being drafted. You're more than likely going to have a handful of teams who have the same big time players, and like it's going to be a lot of overlap. So if you want to go something different to separate yourself, where maybe it's a little early on ADP, go ahead and take that gamble with it. It's okay. It's just, don't be afraid to be risky. It's just on the flip side of that, like you could be completely just kaput by week 4. So no, that's in the range of outcomes if you go a little bit wild with some of these, but it's a charity event, so have fun with it. Don't be too worried about your build specifically, right? Because even if we're looking at the builds on the screen, it's not that many points. It's basically 50 points between the best build and the worst build here. So it's not a ton of points. And if you go average that out per week, like that's a couple points a week, right? So keep that in mind. It's not the end all be all, like, hey, you have to go quarterback, you have to go tight end. No, you don't have to. Right. Like you can mix and match depending on your draft slot. But these are kind of the best of the worst builds of what we've seen. So just with everything, use the stats to your advantage.
Yeah, and to Jesse's point, right? These are like the high floor builds and the safe builds, but you're not building for upside. And the other thing is, like, I was really bad at this because I was using MFL last year, waiver wires. I just don't like waiver wires on MFL, so I struggled. And I think that's why I think I could have been competitive and even made the playoffs if I was a little bit more active on waiver wires. Because I did have a plethora of RB1s. I think I had like 3 RBs that finished as RB1s.
Yeah.
And I still missed the playoffs because I had Wilson and Fields and all my wide receivers kept getting hurt. But if I had, been a little bit more aggressive on waiver wires throughout the season, I think that's one of the key things that I think a lot of the teams that make the playoffs do is they're very aggressive week in and week out in waiver wires.
Yeah, like, and particularly because you can't, once the drafts are over, there is a lag time where no one can do waivers. There is a set date where waivers release. So it's basically like everybody's going after these particular players, because somebody's going to get camp hype, somebody's going to fall. Like there's going to be things that happen where people get injuries. So it could be a guy that doesn't get drafted. All of a sudden he's shooting up waivers for going. I've seen people spend all their waivers on that first drop where they're like, I want this one guy. I remember a couple years ago, it was James Robinson. I spent like 50 of my fab on him. And he sucked. I was just like, no. It's like, well, because I was like, maybe I can spend 100 on. I can't remember the guy who it was, but there was one guy that was everybody wanted. I was like, I'll go cheaper. I'll get James Robinson. He doesn't cost as much, and it didn't work out. But that's part of it. So this is like with auction leagues and same stuff. You can keep your money, save it towards the end, or you can spend it all early. It's just go about how you want to go about it. But yeah, pay attention. And MFL is more complicated, like using the waiver system than Sleeper. It's not 2 clicks, just add. Like, make sure you know that format and fully understand it, so you're not confused and you can't find the player you want, because there's nothing more frustrating than that. If you're like, I swear I can't find this player like this. So yeah, make sure you know the platform you're on.
Yeah, spending all your free agent budget in week 1 or 2, I call that the Elijah Mitchell effect.
Yep.
He kind of propelled teams into championships 2 years ago.
Yeah, like you could have hit on Cordarrelle Patterson 2 years ago, and it would have been great for the first like 10 weeks of the year, where he came out of nowhere and he was a top 12 running back like most of the year. So you can hit on these guys if you hit on the right guy. It's just riskier if you dump all your money on one player. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and with Scott Fishbowl, I think Scott does a great job of tailoring and changing the scoring.
Mhm.
Where every year I just find it fascinating to like run into deep analysis of, okay, what players are more better, what ones are not
Mhm.
better, and doing these analyses, it just kind of changes it up so much every year that it's kind of fun to look at. But again, it's a charity event. Just go have fun, and you connect with all the people that are part of your draft, part of your um, draft spot, and just go have fun. Um,
Yeah,
but
absolutely. That's what it's all about. Like this, it's making connections. We're playing a game we all love. It's just that's what it's all is. So yeah, go have no matter what you do, just make sure it's fun. Like realistically, you're not gonna win. There's only one person out of the 3,300 people that can win, right? So FYI, it's like you're basically getting hit by lightning. Those are the odds. Is what it feels like. So just keep that in mind and just have fun with it because it's not a 12-team league. Like the odds are so much worse than winning this. So just keep that in mind.
we're gonna play our quick ad here, but right outside on the other side of the ad, we're gonna pull up our mock that we're doing in the lounge and kind of just go over some interesting ADPs.
This podcast is sponsored by The League Winners. Check them out at theleaguewinners.com.
All right, so both Jesse and I are on this Scott Fishbowl mock we're doing right now with a 2-hour pick. Um, we're hoping Jesse gets a pick in the next 5 minutes, but I doubt that's going to be the case.
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna happen. It would be fun. A live pick on screen is always a blast. But yeah, it's not gonna happen.
But as we've been saying, Kelsey kind of went 101, which has been the case in some mock drafts. But it's typically the 4 quarterbacks, the 5, 6 quarterbacks in Kelsey, the top 6, 7. At what point do you pivot to, let's say, Justin Jefferson?
So I'm not taking Justin Jefferson. If I'm taking a wide receiver, I'm taking Cup. FYI, I'm shooting the moon. So I know people. All right, so take whoever your wide receiver one is. Let's just say this: like if it's Cup, if it's Jefferson, some people have Hill, some people have Chase, whatever. Whoever your wide receiver one is, you can take them at the 112 on that range. That's totally fine. Because though, if you hit the high end range of outcomes with your wide receiver one, they're a difference maker. They're valuable, big impact on your team. So what I've been looking at for my teams where I'm building from on the end is I really want one of those elite running backs. So I usually end up with either Eckler or McCaffrey, whoever ends up there. One of the two usually ends up there. If I get a chance at Andrews, I'll grab him at tight ends. And occasionally I've been grabbing like Cup or Jefferson just to see how my team looks. And I don't hate it at all. Like I'm not gonna do it. The early spot, the dream spot for me is like the 301, where I get that high end wide receiver. And for some reason, sometimes it's been Hill in the past, sometimes it's been Cup, but one of those top 6 wide receivers falls into that range usually. And the live draft may be completely different, so I might have to just completely chuck this idea out the window, right? Because that happens sometimes. But I don't like taking them at the 201. It's just the opportunity cost of getting that elite running back or tight ends really is kind of differentiator for me. Because we've seen with the scoring, like if you get the high end RB1, like that's massive points. And then of course like the QB1, it's just that's QB10 at that point. I think like 9 or 10 usually in that range, and I can't do it. So for me, it's 301. How about you, Prue? Where is the first spot you were taking your wide receiver?
Right. So I would think maybe in what's that 208 if Hill is there, I might be a little tempted to take him, or if Cup is there. But I'm likely going quarterback or tight end there. And then I'm typically taking a wide receiver in the 4th or 5th in where I'm from at the 5th spot, because outside the top 5, 6 wide receivers who have a legitimate chance of being the wide receiver 1 or 2, I couple almost everyone of them together. Waddle, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin is kind of lower tier there. I'm forgetting someone, but I'm usually getting a good wide receiver in the 4th, 5th. Amari Cooper is another one.
It's right here in this like Debo, Keenan Allen, Cooper range. Those are kind of those guys that seem to fall in that tier of guys you're talking about as far as where ADP goes.
Yeah, I'm not so high on Keenan Allen or Debo, mainly due to age, injury, and potential target competition.
Would you take any of these, like the younger guys, like the Londons or the Judys or anyone like that there, or would you just completely punt if, say Cooper's gone and you're looking at those young guys like London and Judy and whatnot? Would you be comfortable taking that wide receiver, or are you gonna just push?
I think I would punt it another round. I think I have a clear cutoff after Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
And I might just pivot to RB at that point.
Yeah.
Depending on who's available. I think usually you have Harris and Stevenson in that round.
Yeah, I think I've seen Stevenson go in that, like, depending on the draft, in the 4th-ish range, sometimes in the 3rd, sometimes he falls a little bit, so it's not a bad spot to go with. Like, if you scroll down far enough, you'll see, because Stevenson on ADP is 38. He tends to slide a little bit just because people aren't as sure with him. And FYI, these projections are really trash, so do not, if you're doing a draft, don't pay attention to these projections because they don't match the scoring format. FYI. But this ADP is fairly accurate. I've seen Pollard go in the 4th, and I was like, man, I really want him. But yeah, I really like Cooper as if you're pushing wide receiver, getting him. I'm a big fan of Allen, so Cooper, Allen, kind of the same for me. So either one of those guys in the 4th round, I'm more than happy with. I've gotten DK a lot on the 4-5 turn. So if I go Geno DK, like that's a fun one because then it's stacking, right? Yeah, it's I don't expect, particularly because I'm in the Dutch Bros and it's a lot of like Washington State people in that draft. So I don't expect Geno to fall to the 4-12. If I was in another draft, I'd be more confident, but it's like a Jared Goff or whoever it is after that. So it makes it a little bit more interesting for me.
Yeah, and I feel like since this is a Philly draft, I'm going to see a lot of Redskins and Giants and Cowboys fall. So I'm hoping Tony Pollard is a great one. I think I have him actually ranked higher than Stevenson in my RB finishes. So I think he's the one that's got the least concern out of that realm. Harris, Stevenson, and Pollard. I think he's the more secure one in the most secure situation. Better offense, high opportunity share. But like I said, if I'm not landing top 5 wide receiver in the 3rd round, I'm punting wide receiver.
Would you, so say you miss out, because you already talked about your punting tight end, at what point are you stopping the punt of the tight end? What round and what range of tight end are you targeting if you're truly punting tight ends in this format?
Right, so I'll clarify. When I said punt tight end, from rounds 2 to 5, if I'm not getting Hawkinson, Andrews, or Kelsey, I am punting tight end to like the round 7, 8. And you could sometimes get Pat Freiermuth there. But the other ones I like to double tap Dawson Knox and Tyler Higbee. I feel like they're underrated, especially during the start of the season. With Higbee, I mean, who else is there to catch passes outside of Kupp?
Yeah, Higbee, he's going late. He's going double-digit rounds, and so I think you can easily grab him, and he's super safe. Like his target share last year was absurd, and then they had line injuries where basically he had a block. So FYI, like the situation kind of crumbled for Higbee, but him and Kupp were like they were the offense last year for LA. So yeah, I like Higbee. He's like sneaky to me, and where he's going, I'll happily grab Higbee.
Yeah, and Ingram, I think, is sometimes available in the 7th and 8th as well. So
I've seen. Are you in on Waller? Because I've seen him a lot of times fall in that 7-round range.
I wasn't on Waller, but his ADP is rising to like the 5th round, and now I feel like you're drafting him at the ceiling. So I'm a little concerned with Waller. I think the opportunity there and everything, but I feel like he's shown us that he's very injury prone. I think outside of that one season, I think he hasn't played a full season in quite a while.
Yeah, it's been a minute. Pemba, stop. It's been a minute since he's had really good production and played the majority of the year. And it's just, I don't know. I can see him being tight end 3. Like that offense desperately needs him. So I am definitely in on Waller. If he's falling to like round 7, I'm smashing that. Right. But yeah, so for me on tight ends, if it's like once where Freiermuth, he's right here. I actually prefer Freiermuth to Ingram. Like Ingram kind of scares me a little bit just because like they're getting Ridley this year. So I don't know how many of those targets are going to stay with him. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. But yeah, like if I want one of Waller or Freiermuth, if I'm punting past like round 5, like those are the 2 guys I would target. And then if I'm missing out on that, then I'm like you're talking about, I'll probably do what Andrew Cooper calls it, the yin yang theory. I'll grab a Higbee, and then I would grab like an upside guy like, you know, like Chig or Kincaid or Dulcich, one of those guys to kind of pair. So I have 2, like at least one floor tight end and one guy who could theoretically hit an upside, right? And go into that if we're talking double-digit rounds. But I think it's pretty interesting in general.
Another really late round tight end that I like is Ferguson. I feel like there's an opportunity for him to take on a role. I know a lot of people like the rookie, but if, you know, with rookie tight ends, they take a couple of years. So I could see Ferguson assume that role a little bit more this year.
Yeah, he's super late. So you're talking like in the 200. Yeah, he's right there. He's 200. But you could grab Ferguson, and you could also grab, if you really want the Cowboys offense, like you could get Schoonmaker or the other guy, Hendershot from Indiana. Like he's the other guy who's supposed to be a quote unquote like receiving tight end. So you could grab both of those guys and then make sure you get the tight end 1 in Dallas. Because we saw how much Dak likes his tight ends.
Yeah, definitely. I think outside of Kincaid, I don't think I'm targeting any rookie tight end.
Oh, it timed out. I was like, what is that noise? It's like, oh, yeah. Auto pick for McCaffrey. Oh, no, the shame.
Oh, boy.
Goodness.
That should have been Herbert. He's going to throw it up.
Zach's going to be thrilled. He was like, yes, Herbert, thank you. Oh, goodness. But, yeah, so FYI, pay attention to your Scott Fishbowls because if you do time out, you're going to get booted. So don't time out. This is obviously in the slow drafts because you have like 8 hours realistically. So yeah, make sure you set your cues. You do all that stuff. Pay attention so you don't get booted. Because I've seen people get booted before. Everybody's like, wait, what happens? And they just disappear. Oh, there he goes. Oh, Jefferson, interesting. Hey, who knows? Maybe I do get a pick.
Right, maybe. What is that? 1A8?
Yeah, that's 1-8 was Jefferson, 1-9's Herbert, and now it's on 110. He's on the clock. Well, the problem is we got Jeremy in the Netherlands, and who knows if he's even up right now? Like, maybe not. So yeah, it's possible. I don't think I'll get a pick, but it's just life.
There goes Fields. I'm surprised Fields lasted that long.
I know, dude. It's so tough. Like you don't get negative points in the scoring format, but I'd be thrilled getting Fields if he fell to 112, but I'm just not as confident as Fields as I am in these top guys in front of him. Like, I'm much more confident in Herbert and Burrow, but realistically, Fields does have QB1 upside where he could, he could easily be the QB1 if it all hits for him. So, if you want to shoot upside, Fields is the guy you can take.
Let's tweet Jeremy and see if we can make a pick so Jesse can make a live pick on here.
Be like, come on, dude, we need it for the camera. I need to make this pick. Sit. Sorry, it's a bit chaotic in my household right now. My dog and my daughter are fighting for time. Hey, stop.
Nice.
Yeah.
Let's see if Jeremy picks in the next 5 minutes. Otherwise, we can call it. But I could see him going Chase here. I know he's a huge wide receiver proponent.
Which is interesting because like people come in with their preconceived notions, right? Where they're like, gotta have this guy, or I gotta like, this is my ideal build, 0 RB. And then they look at the scoring and it's kind of, I've been in my group chats in the 112 and a lot of people are like, oh man, I hate drafting running backs. They're just so icky and gross. And I'm like, well, you might want to draft some in this format. Like, I know you don't normally like to draft them, but kind of important to have. I don't think if you go that extreme with any build, I don't expect anybody, if they're going to go like bully tight end the first 4 rounds, or if you're going to punt running back to the 12th round, like I don't think your chances of winning are very low, but it's fun to just have extreme builds like that.
Yeah, I mean, outside of Eckler and McCaffrey and both have injury risks, I don't think any of the other running backs have a high percentage of finishing in the top 5. Like even Barkley scares me a little. Josh Jacobs scares me just a tad bit. Um, so outside of McCaffrey and Eckler, like it's, I could see someone like Stevenson or Tony Pollard cracking the top 3.
Yeah, I think
here.
In this scoring format, like you're talking about, it's a little bit different. Where if a dude's a volume hog, which Saquon's going to be, and Henry's more than likely going to be, but he's a little bit risky just because they could blow it up, and then maybe they trade Henry, which entirely could happen. So it's a little bit riskier. But if you get a guy who's getting 300 touches or plus, like Bijan, like you're getting a guy that's going to be a super high floor in this format. So I wouldn't be super worried about them as I am in other scoring formats where it's traditional league. I'm much more worried about those guys. But in this format, like I'm thrilled with because you can get Jacobs in like the 4th round I've seen sometimes, and I'm like, yeah, I'm smashing that. Like I would love a guy like that in the 4th round. In round 1, not so much, but in round 3 or 4, I'm like, yeah, absolutely.
Mixon's another one, right? I think he's like going 5th or 6th round. It's just like, what?
Yeah, he goes. Yeah, I think that's the lingering effects from this offseason, the issues with it, and they were supposed to cut him. So there's all that going on with Mixon. Like you get Chubb is ranked pretty low, and then there's like Brees. There's a couple guys who seem to fall a little bit. So if you're not worried about the ACL injury, Brees is a guy who could be wheels up in the second half for you. It's just you survive the first like half of the year, and then he just takes off, right? So you could do something like that.
Yeah, I don't think I'm taking Brees Hall this year because I am a little wary about that. Him coming back as efficient as he was.
Yeah, I'm much more like in a format like this, Javonte, because he's super late, like he's going in the hundreds, and the cost is very minimal for him. So I'm actually more interested in taking a guy like that in this format where if they hit that upside and they take off the second half, like your team is just rolling towards the playoffs.
You could be like Cam Akers last season.
Yeah, right, where your team is just taking off. Hey, stop. Just stop.
Well, but I tried trying to get Jeremy to pick here, but watch as soon as we end the recording, he's going to make the pick.
I would assume that's exactly how it's going to happen.
But hey, Scottfish draft days are finally here. Everyone go enjoy, flaunt those teams as they get built. Looking forward to the live drafts here this weekend. But everyone else enjoy. Otherwise, follow us at the League Winners, and have fun.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. Take care, folks. Enjoy your Scottfish Bowl drafts, and just enjoy every moment of it.